Hey, I'm Hannah. I'm a writer, and while I do write my own books, I also spend a significant amount of time editing Twilight. I think I just want Stephanie Meyer to notice me. Today we're on chapter 4, and if you would like PDFs of these edited chapters, go ahead and subscribe to my newsletter, link in the description, because I send them out in my newsletter. I think that was clear. There's no time to waste. Let's get started. Chapter 4, Invitations. I still can't believe that she titles her chapters. How did I not know this? In my dream, it was very dark, and what dim light there was seemed to be radiating from Edward's skin. Ugh. I don't like that. What if we just rephrase all of this? What if we said something like, a faint gray illuminated the blackness of my dream? Like, it's still dumb, but what are you gonna do? I'm gonna say the black of my dream. And then what if we just put something simpler, like... Edward, I couldn't see his face, just his back as he walked away from me, leaving in the blackness. Or like Edward glowed as he walked away, fading everything darker. No matter how fast I ran, I couldn't catch up to him. Or Edward glowed as he walked away. I chased him, but the world still faded darker. And then no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't catch him. No matter how loud I called, he never turned. Troubled. I woke in the middle of the night. Shut up. Troubled. I woke in the middle of the night and couldn't sleep again for what seemed like a very long time. Never say that. I always say that writing is a gray area and you can do what you want, but don't say that. I woke in the middle of the night and couldn't sleep again. That's fine. After that, he was in my dreams nearly every night, but always on the periphery, never within reach. That's fine. The month that followed the accident was uneasy, tense, and at first, embarrassing. I think I'm going to take all of that out. One of my writing tips about style is to cut the last thing you did, whether it's like the last clause of a sentence or the last line of a scene. You usually have finished your thought before you finished writing. As writers, we just want to make sure that what we said landed, and it's mostly unnecessary. So look at your sentences and see if you can cut the last bits. It usually makes it better. The month that followed the accident was uneasy. We could even say, to say the least, or whatever, instead of listing all of those things that don't matter. To my dismay, I found myself the center of attention for the rest of that week. I'm going to take out to my dismay because it's cliche, and also we know she doesn't like attention. She tells us every other paragraph. It's a little much. I found myself the center of attention for the rest of the week. Tyler Crowley was impossible, following me around, obsessed with making amends to me. I'm going to take out somehow and to me. Obsessed with making amends. I tried to convince him what I wanted more than anything else was for him to forget all about it, especially since nothing had actually happened to me, but he remained insistent. I think I'm going to make this less wordy and maybe a little funnier and a little more teenage girl. So I tried to convince him what I wanted more than anything else was for him to go away. He followed me between classes and sat at our now crowded lunch table. Mike and Eric, remember they're Erica now. Mike and Erica were even less friendly toward him than they were to each other, which made me worry that I'd gained another unwelcome fan. What, in Tyler? I'm going to take that out. I don't like it. No one seemed concerned about Edward, though. I explained over and over that he was the hero, how he had pulled me out of the way and had nearly been crushed too. I tried to be convincing. Jessica, Mike, and Erica and everyone else always commented that they hadn't even seen him there till the van was pulled away. I'm just going to say said. Why would they say it more than once? I'm going to take out I tried to be convincing. It feels unnecessary. I wondered to myself why no one had seen him standing so far away before he was suddenly and possibly saving my life. Well, yeah, you're wondering to yourself. Would you wonder to someone else? With chagrin, I realized the probable cause. No one else was as aware of Edward as I always was. No one else watched him the way I did. How pitiful. We could replace all three of these sentences with, like, maybe I was watching Edward more than everyone else. How pitiful. She's always so intense with hating herself. That was a little embarrassing. Or something. Edward was never surrounded by crowds of curious bystanders eager for his first-hand account. There are just so many words. We could say, like, people avoided Edward as they always did. That made me jealous, or I was jealous. Or we could put that up here, actually. People avoided Edward as they always did. No one seemed concerned about him, though I explained over and over that he was the hero, how he had pulled me out of the way and nearly been crushed too. I'm gonna take that out because we just had like a stupidly long chapter about it. Jessica, Mike, Erica, and everyone else said they hadn't even seen him there till the van was pulled away. I wondered why no one else had seen him standing so far away before he was suddenly and possibly saving his life. Why don't we just say, I wondered why no one else had noticed that he was across the parking lot before the accident. Maybe I was watching Edward more than everyone else. We could even say that realization was a little embarrassing to keep her wordy, unnecessary voice in it. The Cullens and the Hales sat at the same table as always. Sat at their table. Not eating, talking among themselves. I'm going to take out not eating. None of them, especially Edward, glanced my way anymore. If none of them are doing it, why is it especially Edward? None of them glanced my way. When he sat next to me in class, as far from me as the table would allow, he seemed totally unaware of my presence. Only now and then, when his fists would suddenly ball up, skin stretched even wider at the bones, did I wonder if he wasn't quite as oblivious as he appeared. This is so bulky. I love an M dash. This is just too many. When he sat at our, what class were they in? Not physics. Biology? When he sat at our biology desk as far as the table would allow, he didn't even seem to notice me. Be like, but I'd watch his fists clench. How do they stretch even wider over the bones? He doesn't have blood to push out of the way. That's what makes your knuckles white. And how does he get an erection? Stephanie, please explain. Only now and then when his fists would suddenly ball. Oh, wait. But I'd watch his fists clench under the desk and wondered if he was less oblivious than he pretended to be. He wished he hadn't pulled me from the path of Tyler's van. There was no other conclusion I could come to. Dude, shut up. I wanted very much to talk to him, and the day after the accident, I tried. The last time I'd seen him outside the ER, we'd both been so furious. I still was angry that he wouldn't trust me with the truth, even though I was keeping my part of the bargain flawlessly. But he had, in fact, saved my life, no matter how he'd done it, and overnight the heat of my anger faded into awed gratitude. If you don't shut up. He was already seated when I got to biology, looking straight. We were already sitting at biology. I sat down, expecting him to turn toward me. He showed no sign that he realized I was there. I'm going to take all of that out because it's insufferable. I'm going to say, as I watched, to make it like happening now, but as I watched his fence clench under the desk, I wondered if he was less oblivious than he pretended to be. Hello, Edward, I said pleasantly to show him I was going to behave myself. He turned his head a fraction toward me without meeting my gaze, nodded once, and then looked the other way. I'm going to take out and, because you don't need and then. And that was the last contact I'd had with him, though he was there, a foot away from me every day. I watched him sometimes, unable to stop myself. From a distance, though, in the cafeteria or parking lot, I watched as his golden eyes grew perceptibly darker, day by day. But in class, I gave no more notice that he existed than he showed toward me. I was miserable, and the dreams continued. I think we could make "and the dreams continued" a little more dramatic, which is saying something. So, like, and every night, I dreamt. And then I'll make that its own line. Despite my outright lies, the tenor of my emails alerted me. Tenor of my emails alerted Renee to my depression. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my whole life. And she called me a few times, worried. I tried to convince her it was just the weather that had me down. Does that have anything to do with anything? No, it doesn't. Okay, cool. Mike, at least, was pleased by the obvious coolness between me and my lab partner. I could see he'd been worried that Edward's daring rescue might have impressed me, and he was relieved that it seemed to have the opposite effect. Why do we have to have so many words, Stephanie? He grew more confident. Sitting on the edge of my table to talk after biology class, started ignoring Edward as completely as he ignored us. At least Mike was pleased by the obvious coolness between Edward and I. He grew more confident, perching on the edge of my table to talk to me with his back to Edward. The snow washed away for good after that one dangerously icy day. Mike, I'm going to take that out. Like I said, just take out the ending of things. Mike was pleased, whatever. The snow washed away for good after that one dangerously icy day. I'm going to take that out. Mike was disappointed he'd never gotten to stage his snowball fight, but pleased that the beach trip would soon be possible. Who cares about Mike? The rain continued heavily, though, and the weeks passed. If we need weeks passing, what if we do that? And weeks passed. Jessica made me aware of another event looming on the horizon. She called the first Tuesday of March to ask my permission to invite Mike to the Girls' Choice Spring Dance in 2 weeks. Nobody cares what you do, Jessica. Jessica called the first Tuesday of March to ask my permission to invite Mike to the Girls' Choice Spring Dance. Why would I care? Are you sure you don't mind? You weren't planning to ask him? She persisted when I told her I didn't mind in the least. I think we can assume... No, Jess, I'm not going, I assured her. Dancing was glaringly outside my range of abilities. It will be really fun. Her attempt to convince me was half-hearted. I suspected that Jessica enjoyed the inexplicable popularity more than my actual company. Oh, my inexplicable popularity more than my actual company. Jessica's right. You have fun with Mike, I encouraged. The next day, I was surprised that Jessica wasn't her usual... Dude, we've gone through like a month and a page. It either takes 4 chapters to get through a day or years have passed. The next day, okay, so I was surprised that basically if your prospective character is noting something, that means it's of note. So we don't have to know that she was surprised. Jessica wasn't her usual... That tells us. Okay. She was silent as she walked by my side between classes, and I was afraid to ask her why. If Mike had turned her down, I was the last person she'd want to tell. My fears were strengthened. Shut up. During lunch, when Jessica sat as, why don't we just say, at lunch, Jessica sat as far away. Okay, so the way that most of this is written, it's like holding the reader's hand and explaining to them how they should interpret events. And it's not necessary, and it's like infantilizing to your audience. So just, you don't have to. At lunch, Jessica sat as far from Mike as possible, chatting animatedly with Erica. Mike was unusually quiet. Mike was still quiet. Shut up. We can just say he didn't bring it up on our walk to biology. Mike was still quiet as he walked me to class, the uncomfortable look on his face a bad sign, but he didn't broach the subject until I was in my seat and he was perched on my desk. As always, I was electrically aware of Edward sitting close enough to touch, as distant as if he were merely an invention of my imagination. Jesus! So, Mike said, looking at the floor, Jessica asked me to spring dance. Okay, I'm going to take all that out, and then he didn't bring it up until he was perched on my desk in biology. So, he said, looking at the floor, Jessica asked me to the spring dance. That's great. I made my voice bright and enthusiastic. You'll have lots of fun. With Jessica. You just say you'll have lots of fun. Well, he floundered as he examined my smile, clearly not happy with my response. I told her I had to think about it. Why did you do that? I let disapproval color my tone, though I was relieved he hadn't given her an absolute no. His face was bright red as he looked down again. Pity shook my resolve. I was wondering... Pity shook my resolve. What does that even mean? Shut up. I hate that everything is about her, and she's like, oh wow, this is all about me, and then she's right. His face was bright red as he looked down again. We already saw him looking down, and that's like not necessarily a bad thing to have your character do something more than once in one scene, but you can have them do something else because we've already seen him looking down, so we can add to it, like as he picked at his nails or something. I was wondering if you might be planning to ask me. I paused for a moment. That's what a pause is. A pause is for a moment. Hating the wave of guilt that swept through me, but I saw from the corner of my eye Edward's head tilt reflex. How do you know it's a reflex? Tilted in my direction. Typically, unless you have a reason to do it, you don't need to use a character's name in dialogue. It usually gives it just a little smidge of unnaturalness. I think you should tell her yes. Did you already ask someone? Did Edward notice how Mike's eyes flickered in his direction? No, I assured him. I'm not going to the dance at all. Why not? Mike demanded. People don't care this much. Oh, he said. Why not? Like, relax, Mike. I didn't want to get into the safety hazards that dancing presents, so I quickly made new plans. I'm going to Seattle that Saturday, I said quickly. I needed to get out of town anyway. It was suddenly the perfect time to go. That's, I think, better than what was there before. Can you go some other weekend? Sorry, no, I said. So you shouldn't make Jess wait any longer, it's rude. Yeah, you're right, he mumbled and turned, dejected, to walk back to his seat. I closed my eyes and pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to push the guilt and sympathy out of my head. Mr. Banner began talking. I sighed and opened my eyes. I think I'm going to say began lecture, just because began talking is. I'm going to take out and. Edward was staring at me curiously, that same familiar edge of frustration even more distinct now in his black eyes. Check this out. Boom. I stared back, surprised, expecting him to look away. I feel like I'm drowning in sand. But instead, he continued to gaze with probing intensity into my eyes. There was no question of me looking away. My hand started to shake. It's just not that serious. Mr. Cullen, the teacher called. Isn't his... Mr. Banner? Mr. Banner. Seeking the answer to a question that I hadn't heard. Boop. The Krebs cycle, Edward answered, seeming reluctant as he turned to look at me. What if we just say... Still looking at me, since we love looking at things and eyes and gazing and glaring and... I looked down at my book. You're looking up at your book? Is your book on the ceiling? I looked at my book as soon as his eyes released me, trying to find my place. Cowardly as ever, I shifted my hair over my right shoulder to hide my face. I couldn't believe the rush of emotion pulsing through me, just because he'd appeared to look at me for the first time in half a dozen weeks. I couldn't allow him. It was pathetic, more than pathetic. It was unhealthy. And there's the thesis statement. Check this out. Boop. We don't need it. I don't want it. I tried very hard not to be aware of him for the rest of the hour, and since that was impossible, at least not to let him know I was aware of him. When the bell rang at last, I turned my back to gather my things, expecting him to leave immediately. What if we say I turned, assuming he'd already gone? That way we could have a little surprise moment. Bella, his voice shouldn't have been so familiar to me, as if I'd known the sound of it all my life rather than just for a few short weeks. I turned slowly, unwillingly. I didn't want to feel what I knew I would feel when I looked at his too perfect face. My expression was wary when I finally turned to him. His expression was unreadable. He didn't say anything. There are so many words to express nothing. I turned slowly. How about we just boop? What? Are you speaking to me again? I'm going to take out I turned slowly and just have her be sassy. Anything to make her more interesting. What? Are you speaking to me again? I finally asked, an unintentional note of petulance in my voice. His lip twitched, fighting a smile. No, not really, he admitted. I closed my eyes and inhaled slowly through my nose, aware that I was gritting my teeth. He waited. Then what do you want, Edward? I asked. Why is his name Edward? I know we've never addressed this. I just think that's the dumbest name. It's because he's old. Sure, there are cooler names. What about Timothy? Well, Timmy. Anyway. Then what do you want, Edward? I asked, keeping my eyes closed. It was easier to talk to him coherently that way. What if she's just still shoving my textbook into my bag? She's busy. She's got things to do. I'm sorry, he sounded sincere. I'm being very rude, I know, but it's better this way, really. Then why are you talking to her? I opened my eyes. His face was very serious. I don't know what you mean, I said, my voice guarded. It's better if we're not friends, he explained. Trust me, my eyes narrowed. I'd heard that before. It's too bad you couldn't figure that out earlier, I hissed through my teeth. You could have saved yourself all this regret. Regret? The word and my tone obviously caught him off guard. Regret for what? For not just letting that stupid van squish me. He was astonished. He stared at me in disbelief. When he finally spoke, he almost sounded mad. You think I regret saving your life? I know you do, I snapped. Bella, not everyone wants you dead. She's like, he doesn't want to marry me. He must have wanted me to get smashed to death. You don't know anything. He's definitely mad. I turned my head sharply away from him, clenching my jaw against all the wild accusations I wanted to hurl. Okay, I'm going to take out at him because we already have a from him. And you want to watch, like, the unintentional repetition. It can make things sound awkward. I gathered my books together. No, we already did that. I walked to the door. I meant to sweep dramatically out of the room, of course, but I caught the toe of my boot on the door jamb and dropped my books. I stood there for a moment thinking about leaving them. That's funny. Then I sighed and bent to pick them up. He was there. He'd already stacked them into a pile. He handed them to me, his face hard. Thank you, I said icily. His eyes narrowed. I'm going to take that out because it's stupid. You're welcome, he retorted. I straightened up swiftly, turning away from him and stalking to Jim without looking back. Jim was brutal. We'd moved on to basketball. My team never passed me the ball, so that was good, but I fell down a lot. Is she okay? I feel like she might have some equilibrium issues. Did you have vertigo? I'd go to the nurse. Sometimes I took people with me. Today I was worse than usual because my head was so filled with Edward. I tried to concentrate on my feet, but he kept creeping back into my thoughts just when I really needed my balance. I'm going to take that out because I don't like it. It was a relief, as always, to leave. I almost ran to the truck. There were just so many people I wanted to avoid. The truck had suffered only minimal damage in the accident. I'd had to replace the taillights, and if I'd had a real paint job, I would have touched that up. Tyler's parents had to sell their van for parts. I almost had a stroke when I rounded the corner and saw a tall, dark figure leaning against the side of my truck. Then I realized it was, oh yay, we have an Erica scene. I realized it was just Erica. I started walking again, obviously. Hey, Erica, I called. Hi, Bella. What's up? I said as I was unlocking the door. I wasn't paying attention to the uncomfortable edge in her voice, so her next words took me by surprise. I was just wondering if you would go to the spring dance with me? Her voice broke on the last word. I thought it was a girl's choice. Oh, that doesn't work, does it? I'm gonna take that out. I recovered my composure. Let's see. I almost choked on air. But I recovered my composure and tried to make my smile warm. Thank you for asking me, but I was going to go to Seattle that day. Oh, she said. Well, maybe next time. I'm going to put a little action in there. So, like, oh. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and it immediately fell back in front of her face. When I made one of the characters a girl, and I care about them now, so I'm going to write description. Dark hair. Well, maybe next time. Sure, I agreed, and then bit my lip. I wouldn't want her to take that too literally. She slouched off back toward the school. I heard a low chuckle. Edward was walking past the front of my truck, looking straight forward, his lips pressed together. I think it's good because Eric asked Bella, and now that it's Erica, it's still girl's choice. Edward was walking past the front of my truck, looking straight forward, his lips pressed together. I yanked the door open and jumped inside, slamming it loudly behind me. I revved the engine deafeningly and reversed out into the aisle. Edward was in his car already, 2 spaces down, sliding out smoothly in front of me, cutting me off. I make this a new paragraph. Edward was in his car already, 2 spaces down, sliding out smoothly in front of me, cutting me off. What a dick. He stopped there to wait for his family. I could see the 4 of them walking this way, but still by the cafeteria. I considered taking out the rear of his shiny Volvo, but there were too many witnesses. I love that. Yes. I looked in my rearview mirror. A line was beginning to form. Directly behind me, Tyler Crowley was in his recently acquired used Sinatra waving. Sinatra? Frank? No, it's Nancy. I was too aggravated to acknowledge him. While I was sitting there, looking everywhere but at the car in front of me, I heard a knock on my passenger side window. I looked over. It was Tyler. If Tyler's about to ask her to the dance... I glanced back in my rearview mirror, confused. His car was still running, the door left open. I leaned across... I'm going to take out confused... I leaned across the cab to crank the window down. It was stiff. I got it halfway down, then gave up. I'm sorry, Tyler. I'm stuck behind Cullen. I was annoyed. Obviously, the holdup wasn't my fault. Oh, I know. I just wanted to ask you something while we were trapped here. Imagine almost killing a girl, and then a few weeks later, you ask her to the girl's choice dance. Tyler. That's the perfect name for him. Only someone named Tyler would have the audacity. This could not be happening. Will you ask me to the spring dance? He continued. I'm not going to be in town, Tyler. My voice sounded a little sharp. I had to remember it wasn't his fault that Mike and Erica had already used up my quota of patience for the day. Yeah, Mike said that, he admitted. Then why? He shrugged. I was hoping you're just letting him down easy. Okay, it was completely his fault. I was going to take out Tyler asking because that's just too much and I'm tired of it. But now it's funny, so. Sorry, Tyler, I said, working to hide my irritation. I really am going out of town. That's cool. We still have prom. Ew. And before I could respond, he was walking back to his car. I could feel the shock on my face. I looked forward to see Alice, Rosalie, Emmett, and Jasper all sliding into the Volvo. In his rearview mirror, Edward's eyes were on me. He was unquestionably shaking with laughter as if he'd heard every word Tyler had said. My foot itched toward the gas pedal. One little bump wouldn't hurt any of them. Just that glossy silver paint job. I revved the engine. I like that too. I'm leaving that. But they were all in, and Edward was speeding away. I drove home slowly, carefully, muttering to myself the whole way. When I got home, I decided to make chicken enchiladas for dinner. It was a long process, and it would keep me busy. While I was simmering the onion and chilies, the phone rang. I was almost afraid to answer it, but it might be Charlie or my mom. It was Jessica. And she was jubilant. Mike had caught her after school to accept her invitation. I celebrated with her briefly while I stirred. She had to go. She wanted to call Angela and Lauren to tell them. I suggested, with casual innocence, that maybe Angela, the shy girl who had biology with me, could ask Erica. And Lauren, a standoffish girl who had always ignored me at the lunch table, could ask Tyler. I'd heard he was still available. Jess thought that was a great idea. Now that she was sure of Mike, she actually sounded sincere when she said she wished I would go to the dance. I gave her my Seattle excuse. After I hung up, I tried to concentrate on dinner. Dicing the chicken especially. I didn't want to take another trip to the emergency room when you're cutting chicken and it's very dangerous and you're really worried. But my head was spinning, trying to analyze every word Edward had spoken today. What did he mean? It was better if we weren't friends. It means he doesn't want to hang out with Bella. Just get over it. My stomach twisted as I realized what he might have... Oh, this isn't another scene? Okay. My stomach twisted as I realized what he must have meant. He must see how absorbed I was by him. He must not want to lead me on, so we couldn't even be friends because he wasn't interested in me at all. To continue the rule of me taking out Bella being insufferable, that's gonna go. Of course he wasn't interested in me, I thought angrily, my eyes stinging, a delayed reaction to the onions. I wasn't interesting, and he was interesting and brilliant and mysterious and perfect and beautiful and possibly able to lift full-side bands with... no. Well, that was fine. I could leave him alone, and I would leave him alone. Wait. That was fine. I could leave him alone, I would leave him alone, and would get through my self-imposed sentence here in purgatory, and then hopefully some school in the Southwest or possibly Hawaii would offer me a scholarship. There we go, girl. I focused my thoughts on sunny beaches and palm trees as I finished the enchiladas and put them in the oven. Charlie seemed suspicious when he came home and smelled the green peppers. I couldn't blame him. The closest edible Mexican food was probably in Southern California, but he was a cop, even if just a small-town cop, so he was brave enough to take the first bite. Okay. I'm gonna take that out because it's stupid. He seemed to like it. It was fun to watch as he slowly began trusting me in the kitchen. Dad, I asked when he was almost done. Yeah, Bella. I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to Seattle for the day a week from Saturday, if that's okay. I didn't want to ask permission. It set a bad precedent, but I felt rude, so I tacked it on at the end. Okay, that's fine. Anything for her to be thinking about that's not Edward, I'm fine with. Why? He sounded surprised, as if he were unable to imagine something that Forks couldn't offer. Well, I wanted to get a few... See, I feel like her writing can be relatable and almost clever if we take out all of this self-loathing. Well, I wanted to get a few books. The library here is pretty limited, and maybe look at some clothes. I had more money than I was used to having since, thanks to Charlie, I hadn't had to pay for a car. Not that the truck didn't cost me quite a bit in the gas department. That truck probably doesn't get good gas mileage, he said, echoing my thoughts. I know, I'll stop in Montesano and Olympia and Tacoma if I have to. What? Oh, this is her talking. I was like, what is he saying? Are you going all by yourself? He asked, and I couldn't tell if he was suspicious I had a secret boyfriend or just worried about car trouble. Yes, Seattle is a big city. You could get lost, he fretted. Dad, Phoenix is 5 times the size of Seattle, and I can read a map. Don't worry about it. Do you want me to come with you? I tried to be crafty as I hid my horror. That's all right, Dad. Just let Charlie hang out with you. I'll probably just be in dressing rooms all day. Very boring. Oh, okay. The thought of sitting in women's clothing stores for any period of time immediately put him off. Thanks, I smiled at him. Will you be back in time for the dance? Grr. Grr. Why are you growling at your dad? Okay, we're gonna take that out. Only in a small town would a father know when the high school dances were. I don't know that that's true. I'm gonna take that out because Charlie is a very good and attentive father. God damn it. No, I don't dance, Dad. He of all people should understand that. I didn't get my balance problems from my mother. If she doesn't stop coming for Charlie's throat, he did understand. Oh, that's right, he realized. You're a massive klutz. I forgot. The next morning, when I pulled in the parking lot, I deliberately parked as far as possible from the silver Volvo. I didn't want to put myself in the path of too much temptation and end up owing him a new car. Getting out of the cab, I fumbled with my key, and it fell into a puddle at my feet. As I bent to get it, a white hand flashed out and grabbed it before I could. I jerked upright. Edward Cullen was right next to me, casually leaning against my truck. How do you do that? I asked in amazed irritation. Do what? He held my key out as he spoke. As I reached for it, he dropped it into my palm. Appear out of thin air? Oh wait, that's her saying it. Bella, it's not my fault if you are exceptionally unobservant. His voice was quiet as usual. Velvet, muted. I don't understand why he has to be so rude. I scowled at his perfect face. His eyes were light again today, a deep golden honey color. Then I had to look down to reassemble my now tangled thoughts. Let's take this out, because calling his face perfect is plenty enough. Why the traffic jam last night? I demanded, still looking away. They got still because we took out the first one. I thought you were supposed to be pretending I don't exist, not irritating me to death. Yes. That was for Tyler's sake, not mine. I had to give him his chance. He snickered. You? I gasped. I couldn't think of a bad enough word. Bitch. It felt like the heat of my anger could physically burn him, but he only seemed more amused. And I'm not pretending you don't exist, he continued. So you are trying to irritate me to death since Tyler's van didn't do the job? Anger flashed in his tawny eyes. His lips pressed into a hard line. All signs of humor gone. Bella, you are utterly absurd, he said, his voice cold. Shut up. My palms tingled. I wanted so badly to hit something. Hit him. I was surprised at myself. I was usually a nonviolent person. I turned my back and started to walk away. Wait, he called. I kept walking, sloshing angrily through the rain, but he was next to me, easily keeping pace. I'm sorry, that was rude, he said as we walked. I ignored him. I'm not saying it isn't true, he continued, but it was rude to say it anyway. Why don't you leave me alone? I grumbled. That's an excellent question. What does he want? I wanted to ask you something, but you sidetracked me, he chuckled. He seemed to have recovered his good humor. Do you have a multiple personality disorder? I asked severely. You're doing it again. She makes a lot of references to mental illness. I sighed. Fine then, what do you want to ask? I was wondering if, a week from Saturday, you know, the day of the spring dance. Are you trying to be funny? I interrupted him, wheeling toward him. My face got drenched as I looked up at his expression. His eyes were wickedly amused. Will you please allow me to finish? No, just walk away. That was a good idea. I bit my lip and clasped my hands together, interlocking my fingers so I couldn't do anything rash. I heard you say you were going to Seattle that day, and I was wondering if you wanted a ride. That was unexpected. What? I wasn't sure what he was getting at. Do you want to ride to Seattle? With who? I asked, mystified. Myself, obviously, he enunciated every syllable as if he were talking to someone mentally handicapped. Bella, as if he were talking to a child, because he is. I was still stunned. Why? Well, I was planning to go to Seattle in the next few weeks, and to be honest, I'm not sure if your truck can make it. My truck works fine, thank you very much for your concern. I started to walk again, but I was too surprised to maintain the same level of anger. But your truck can make it there on one tank of gas? But can your truck make it there on one tank of gas? He matched my pace again. I don't see how that is any of your business, stupid shiny Volvo owner. The wasting of finite resources is everyone's business. Honestly, Edward, I felt the thrill go through me as I said his name, and I hated it. I can't keep up with you. I thought you didn't want to be my friend. I said it would be better if we weren't friends, not that I didn't want to be. Don't talk to him. Oh, thanks. Now that's all cleared up. Heavy sarcasm. I realized I had stopped walking again. We were under the shelter of the cafeteria roof now, so I could more easily look at his face, which certainly didn't help my clarity of thought. It would be more prudent for you not to be my friend, he explained, but I'm tired of trying to stay away from you, Bella. Then she can do it for you. Bella, please leave. His eyes were gloriously intense as he uttered that last sentence, his voice smoldering. I couldn't remember how to breathe. I'm going to take that out because I don't want her to be so into him because he's awful. Will you go with me to Seattle? He asked, still intense. I couldn't speak yet, so I just nodded. He smiled briefly, then his face became serious. You really should stay away from me, he warned. I'll see you in class. Huh? He turned abruptly and walked back the way we'd come. What if I just end the book here and, like, she doesn't speak to him again? I think that'd be pretty cool. I hate Edward way more than Bella. Bella's kind of annoying, but she's also, like, 16, so she's allowed. What is Edward's excuse? Anyway, if you want to read the edited version, it does go out in my newsletter. Check the link in the description. Like and subscribe if you want to. Thank you to my patrons for sponsoring this video. I'll see you next week. Bye.